guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be reading the Ickabog 54, 55, and 56. Okay, let's get started. Chapter 54, The Song of the Ickabog. The Song of the Ickabog. Ickabog, 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 Ickabog. The Song of the Ickabog, Chapter 54, 54, 54. The Ickabog had just drawn breath with its usual sound and inflating bagpipe when Daisy said, "What language do you sing in, Ickabog?" The Ickabog looked down at her, startled to find Daisy so close at first. Daisy thought it wasn't going to answer, but at last it said, in its slow, deep voice, "Ickarish." "And what's the song about?" "It's a story of Ickabogs, and of your kind too." "You mean people?" asked Daisy. "People, yes," said the Ickabog. "The two stories are one story because people were born out of the Ickabogs. It drew in its breath to sing again, but Daisy asked, "What does born mean? Is it the same as born?" "No," said the Ickabog, looking down at her. "Born is very different from being born. It's how new Ickabogs come to be." Daisy wanted to be polite, seeing how enormous the Ickabog was, so she said cautiously, "That does sound a bit like being born." "Well, isn't it?" said the Ickabog in its deep voice. "Born and borned are very different things. When babies are borned, we who have borned them die." Always, asked Daisy, noticing how the Ickabog absent-mindedly rubbed its tummy as it spoke. "Always," said the Ickabog. "That is the way of the Ickabog. To live with your children is one of the strangeness of people." "But that's so sad," said Daisy slowly, "to die when your children are born." "It isn't sad at all," said the Ickabog. "The borning is a glorious thing. Our whole lives led up to the boarding. What we're doing and what we're feeling when our babies are borned gives them their nature. It is very important to have a good borning." "I don't understand," said Daisy. "If I die sad and hopeless," explained the Ickabog, "my babies won't survive. I've watched my fellow Ickabogs die in despair, one by one, and their babies survived them only only by seconds, and Ickabog can't live without hope. It's the last Ickabog left. I'm the last Ickabog left, and my boarding will be the most important boarding in history, because if my boarding goes well, our species will survive, and if not, Ickabogs will be gone forever. All of our troubles began from the bad boarding, you know. It is that what your song's about, asked Daisy. The bad boardings. The Ickabog nodded, its eyes fixed on the darkening snowy marsh. Then it took another deep bagpipe breath and began to sing. And this time it sang in words that humans could understand. At the dawn of time, when only Ickabogs exist, man was not created with his cold, flint-hearted ways. Then the world in its perfection was like heaven's bright reflection. No one hunted us or harmed us in those lost beloved days. Oh, Ickabogs, come boarding back, my Ickabogs. Oh, Ickabogs, come boarding back, my own. Then tragedy, one stormy night, came bitterness, born it of fight, and bitterness so tall and stout was different from its fellows. Its voice was rough, it always were mean. The likes of it had not been seen before, and so they drove it out with angry blows and bellows. Oh, Ickabog, be boarded wise, my Ickabogs. Oh, Ickabogs, be boarded wise, my own. 8,000 miles from its old home, its boarding time arrived alone. In darkness, bitterness expired, and hatred came to being. A hairless Ickabog this last, a peace sworn to avenge the past, with bloodlust was to creature fired, its evil eye far seeing. Oh, Ickabog, be boarded kind, my Ickabogs. Oh, Ickabog, be boarded kind, my own. Then hatred spawned the race of men. To us from ourselves that men began. From bitterness and hate they swelled, to armies rised to smite us. In hundreds Ickabogs were slain, our blood poured on the land like rain. Our ancestors like trees were fell, and still men came to fight us. Oh, Ickabogs, be boarded brave, my Ickabogs. Oh, Ickabogs, be boarded brave, my own. Men forced us from our sunlit home, away from grass and mud and stone, into the endless fog and rain, and here we stayed with dwindled, till our race there's only one survivor of the spear and gun, whose children must begin again, with hate and fury kindled. Oh, Ickabog, now kill the men, my Ickabogs. Oh, Ickabogs, now kill the men, my own. Daisy and Ickabog sat in silence for a while after the Ickabog had finished singing. The stars were coming out now. Daisy fixed her eyes on the moon as she said, "How many people have you eaten, Ickabog?" The Ickabog sighed. "None so far. Ickabogs like mushrooms. Are you planning on eating us when your boarding time comes?" she asked. "So your babies are born believing Ickabogs eat people. You want to turn them into people killers, don't you? To take back your land?" The Ickabog looked down at her. It didn't seem to want to answer, but at last it nodded its huge shaggy head. Behind Daisy, the Ichabog, Bert, Martha, and Roderick exchanged terrified glances by the light of the dying fire. "I know what it's like to lose the people you love the most," said Daisy quietly. "My mother died, and my father disappeared for a long time, and my father went away. I made myself believe that he was still alive because I had to, or I think I'd have died as well." Daisy got to her feet and looked up into the Ickabog's sad eyes. "I think people need to hope nearly as much as the Ickabogs do," but she said, placing her hand over her heart. "My mother and father are both still in here, and they always will be. So when you eat me, the Ickabog, Ickabog, eat my heart last. I like to keep my parents alive as long as I can." She walked back into the cave, and the four humans settled down on their piles of wool again, beside the fire. A little later, sleepy though she was, Daisy thought she heard Ickabog sniff. Chapter 55. Spittleworth offends the king. So I guess now we're going to go back. After the disaster of the runaway mail coach, Lord Spittleworth took steps to make sure a thing would never happen again. A new proclamation was issued without a king's knowledge, which allowed the chief advisor to open letters to check them for signs of treason. The proclamation notices helpfully listed all the things that were now considered treason in Cornucopia. It was still treason to say that the Ickabog wasn't real, and that Fred wasn't a good king. It was treason to criticize Lord Spittleworth and Lord Flaboon. Treason to say the Ickabog tax was too high, and for the first time, treason to say that Cornucopia wasn't as happy, as well-fed as it had always been. Now that everybody was too frightened to tell the truth in their letters, mail, and even traveled to the capital, dwindled to almost nothing, which was exactly what Spittleworth had wanted, and he started on phase 2 of his plan. This was that to send a lot of fan mail to Fred, as these letters couldn't all have the same handwriting. Spittleworth had shut up a few soldiers in the room with a stack of paper and lots of quills, and told them what to write. "Praise the king, of course," said Spittleworth as he swept up and down the front of the men in his chief advisor robes. "Tell him he's the best ruler of the country ever had. Praise me too. Say that you don't know what would become of Cornucopia without Lord Spittleworth, and say you know the Ickabog would have killed him, would have killed many more people if not for the Ickabog Defense Brigade, and that Cornucopia is richer than ever." So Fred began to receive letters telling him how marvelous he was, and that the country had never been happier, and that the war against the Ickabog was going very well indeed. "Well, it appears everything's going splendidly," beamed King Fred, waving one of the letters over lunch with the two lords. He'd been much more cheerful since the forgeries had started to arrive. The bitter winter had frozen the ground so that it was dangerous to go hunting, but Fred, who was wearing a gorgeous new costume of burnt orange silk with topaz buttons, felt particularly handsome today, which added to his cheerfulness. It was quite delightful watching the snow tumble down outside the window, when he had a blazing fire, and his table was piled high as usual with expensive foodstuff. "I had no idea so many Ickabogs had been killed, Spittleworth. In fact, come to think of it, I didn't even know there was more than one Ickabog." "Yes, sire," said Spittleworth with a furious glance at Flaboon, who was stuffing himself with a particular delicious cream cheese. Spittleworth had so much to do. He'd given Flapoon the job of checking all the forged letters before they were sent to the king. We didn't wish to alarm you, but we realized some time ago that the monster had Nickhoff delicately reproduced. I see, said Fred. Well, it's jolly good news you're finishing them off at such a rate. We should have one stuffed, and hold an exhibition for the people. Yes, sire. What an excellent idea, said Flapoon, Spittleworth, through the gritted teeth. One thing I don't understand, though, said Fred, frowning over the letter again. Didn't Professor Rowdysham say that every time an Ickabog dies to grow in its place by killing them like this? Aren't you, in fact, doubling their numbers? No, sire, not really, said Spittleworth, his cunning mind working furiously fast. We've actually found a way to stopping that happening by banging them over the head first, suggested Flapoon. Banging them over the head first, repeated Spittleworth, nodding. That's it. If you get near enough to knock them out before killing them, sire, the doubling process seems to stop. But why didn't you tell me of this amazing discovery, Spittleworth? Cried Fred. This changes everything. We might soon have wiped Ickabog from a cornucopia forever. Yes, sire, it is good news, isn't it? Said Spittleworth, wishing he could smack the smile of Flapoon's face. However, there are still quite a few Ickabogs left. All the same, the end seems to be in sight at last, said Fred, joyfully setting the letter aside and picking up his knife and fork again. How very sad that poor Major Roach was killed by an Ickabog just before we began to turn the tables on the monsters. Very sad, sire, yes, agreed Spittleworth, who of course had explained away Major Roach's sudden disappearance by telling the king he'd laid down his life in the marshlands trying to prevent the Ickabog coming south. Well, this all makes sense of something I've been wondering about, said Fred. The servants are constantly singing the national anthem. Have you heard them? Jolly uplifting and all that, but it does become a bit samey. But this is why they're celebrating our triumph over the Ickabogs, aren't they? That must be it, sire, said Spittleworth. In fact, their singing was coming from the prisoners in the dungeons, now the servants, but Fred was unaware that he had 50 or so people trapped in the dungeons beneath him. We should hold a ball in celebration, said Fred. We haven't had a ball for a very long time. It seems an age since I danced with the Lady Islanda. Nuns don't dance, said Spittleworth crossly. He stood up, abruptly Flapoon a word. The two lords were halfway toward the door when the king commanded, "Wait." Both turned. King Fred looked suddenly displeased. Neither of you asked permission to leave the king's table. The two lords exchanged glances. Then Spittleworth bowed, and Flapoon copied him. I crave your majesty's pardon, said Spittleworth. It's simply that if we are to act on your excellent suggestion of having the dead Ickabog stuffed, sire, we must act quickly. It might rot otherwise. All the same, said Fred, fingering the golden medal he wore around his neck, which was embossed with a picture of the king fighting the dragonish monster. I remain the king, Spittleworth, your king. Of course, sire, said Spittleworth, bowing low again. I live only to serve you, said Fred. We'll see that you remember it, and be quick about stuffing that Ickabog. I wish to display it to the people. Then we shall discuss the celebration ball. Chapter 56, The Dungeon Plot. As soon as Spittleworth and Flapoon were out of earshot of the king, Spittleworth rounded the on Flapoon. You were supposed to check all those letters before giving them to the king. Where am I supposed to find a dead Ickabog to stuff? So something, suggests Flapoon with a shrug. So something. Well, what else can I do? Said Flapoon, taking a large bite of the Duke's delight he sneaked from the king's table. What can I do? Repeated Spittleworth, incensed. You think this is all my problem? You were the one who invented the Ickabog, said Flapoon, thickly, as he chewed. He was getting very bored of Spittleworth shouting at him and bossing him about. And you're the one who killed Beamish, snarled Spittleworth. Where would you be now if I hadn't blamed the monster? Without waiting for Flapoon's response, Spittleworth turned and headed down to the dungeons. At the very least, he could stop the prisoners singing the national anthem so loudly, so the king might think the war against the Ickabog had taken a turn for the worse again. Quiet, bellowed Spittleworth as he entered the dungeons. Because of the place was ringing with noise, there was singing and laughter, and Cankerpie, the footman, was running between the cells, fetching and carrying kitchen supplies, equipment for all the different prisoners, and the smell of maiden streams fresh from Miss Beamish's oven filled the warm air. The prisoners all looked far better fed than the last time Spittleworth had been down there. He didn't like it at all. He especially didn't like to see Captain Goodfellow looking as fit and strong as ever he had. Spittleworth liked his enemies weak and hopeless. Even Mr. Dovetail looked as though he trimmed his long white beard. You are keeping track, aren't you? He asked the panting Cankerpie, of all those pots and knives and whatnots you're handing out. Of course, my lord, gasped the footman, not liking to admit that he was so confused by all the orders Mrs. Beamish was giving him that he had no idea which prisoner had what. Spoons, whisk, ladles, saucepans, and baking trays had to be passed between the bars to keep up with the demand for Miss Beamish's pastries, and once or twice Cankerpie had accidentally passed one of Mr. Dovetail's chisels to another prisoner. He thought he collected everything at the end of each night, but how on earth was he to be sure? And sometimes Cankerpie worried that the warder of the dungeons, who was fond of wine, might not hear the prisoners whispering to one another if they took it into their heads to plot anything after the candles were snuffed out at night. However, Cankerpie could tell that Spittleworth was in no mood to have problems brought to him, so the footman held his tongue. There will be no more singing, shouted Spittleworth, his voice echoing through the dungeons. The king has a headache. In fact, it was Spittleworth whose head was beginning to throb. He forgot the prisoners as soon as he turned back his back on them and fell back to pondering how on earth he was going to make a convincing stuffed Ickabog. Perhaps Flapoon was on to do something. Might they take the skeleton of the bull and kidnap the seamstress to stitch the dragonish covering over the bones and pat it out with sawdust? Lies upon lies upon lies. Once you started lying, you had to continue, and then it was like being captain of a leaky ship, always plugging holes in the side to stop yourself sinking. Lost in thoughts of skeletons and sawdust, Spittleworth had no idea that he just turned his back on what promised to be the biggest problem yet. A dungeon full of plotting prisoners, each of whom had knives and chisels hidden beneath their blankets, and behind those bricks of their wall. That's what happens. I don't like lying. I don't lie. Because when you lie, you have to continue lying to maintain that lie. And that's when your memory, that's why I like that saying. I'm not fully sure how you say it, but it's, if you don't lie, you won't ever have problems with your memory, something like that. But I like that because it's true. When I lie, you gotta continue lying and lying and lying. And then you kind of forget where the lie began or how you started saying the lie, and it's just too much. So I'd rather say the truth. I'm kind when I say the truth, because sometimes there's people that don't know how to, they just kind of roughly say the truth, and you gotta think about the other person that's hearing it. And I'm not like that. I will tell you the truth, but I will be kind about it. So obviously Spittleworth and Fluboon are going to get theirs. I'm wondering how the story's gonna end because of that. So thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much. Please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and please don't forget to follow me on Instagram. I have 2 separate accounts. Comment, share, hit the bell for notification. I always forget to say hit the bell for notifications. Right, that's it. Comment. Oh, give me a thumbs up. So give me a thumbs up, and I will talk to you in my next video.